Now, right across Australia, Chris Smith filling in for Alan Jones.
And a very good morning. Welcome to December the 12th, 2017. This is Chris Smith for Alan Jones. Good to have your company this morning. The rosters tell me I'll be taking you through right until the first week in January. And we'll have our main man, Alan Jones, will be back later in the month, so not long to go now. You've woken to a quite significant morning for news, both here and abroad. And before I get to the main headlines, I should get you some weather. In terms of decent rain, no decent rain to write about, although Townsville did receive a small 6mm fall. 6 mils, dry as a bone in that part of the world. They really need it. The top temperature in New South Wales was 38 at Tibooburra, the low 5 at Perisher, and away from the snowies, it was 9 at Bombala. Now, the top in Queensland, 42 at Camberwell, and the low 13 at, you guessed it, Applethorpe takes the minimum temperature again for Queensland. Now, the sun rose in Sydney at 5:38, and it rises in Brisbane at 4:46, about 5 minutes away. Across the country, a mainly dry day, a possible shower or storm in Darwin, which is typical of this time of the year. Partly cloudy in Hobart and Canberra, becoming sunny in Melbourne, and mostly sunny in Perth and Adelaide. For Brisbane today, a partly cloudy day with the slight chance of a shower around the Bayside suburbs and a top temp of 29 degrees. Mostly sunny tomorrow and sunny on Thursday and Friday too in Brisbane. For Sydney today, we're expecting some patchy early fog and then a mostly sunny afternoon with a top temperature of 27 degrees in the city and 34 in the west. It's starting to heat up because it gets mostly sunny tomorrow and then hot and partly cloudy on Thursday. Now, they're saying about 35 degrees. That's in the city, and tipping 40 and beyond for parts of the western suburbs. A shower or two on Friday. So plenty to report on the weather front for this week, especially in Sydney. Okay, let's look at news for this Tuesday, December 12. And as I say, news happening abroad, not just locally. A man has been arrested after 3 people were injured in an attempted terrorist attack on the main bus terminal in New York City. Now, it happened at 7:30 a.m. during the morning peak, involving what's been described as a low-tech explosive device, which was strapped to the body of 27-year-old Akayed Ullah. Now, the Port Authority bus terminal, it's the busiest of its kind in the world, this place. It serves more than 65 million passengers a year, in 1 year. One witness said, "I was going through the turnstile, it sounded like an explosion, and everybody started running." Another witness said, "A woman fell, and nobody even went to stop and help her because the panic was so scary." Now, the bus terminal was shut down and nearby subway stations evacuated. Ullah, who was injured in the attack, is believed to have acted alone at this stage. He's said to have been inspired by Islamic State, but apparently had not had any direct contact with the group. So this is, by definition, a lone wolf. Photos from the scene show the injured Ullah being taken away on stretcher. The 3 other victims suffered only minor injuries. It could have been a lot worse. Back home, and Malcolm Turnbull, well, he's everywhere, Malcolm Turnbull. The Prime Minister has been doing the rounds of the interview circuit, talking about everything from a cabinet reshuffle and a federal ICAC to the strength of the economy and his regret at using news poll results as part of the basis for his toppling Tony Abbott. Bit too late for that, Malcolm Turnbull. The PM, who's lost 24 news polls in a row, says he regrets citing Mr Abbott's loss in 30 news polls as a reason for getting rid of him. He's told The Telegraph, "I do regret having said it, only because it allowed people to focus on that rather than the substantive reasons." He said the substantive reasons I stated were related to economic leadership and governance. Mr Turnbull says his government has been able to deliver some very big achievements, despite not having anything near a majority in the Senate, with a 1-seat majority in the House. He says, "Look at the thorny issues we've dealt with this year. The marriage issue, the energy issue." Mr Turnbull has pointed to a ministerial reshuffle either this month or next, saying he's focused on bringing young people into the cabinet. And then from The Telegraph, it was on to the Australian newspaper. So he's doing the rounds, where he spoke about tax, saying that both personal and business cuts can be afforded. Really? He says the timing and extent of the cuts will depend on how the budget numbers fall into place. And with the mid-year budget review expected to show a stronger bottom line, he says, we've got reason to be optimistic. And then it was over to Fairfax, where the PM spoke to the Herald about a federal independent commission against corruption. Where that came from, I got no idea. Have we been talking about that in 2017? Oh, just. He's said to have suggested for the very first time he's considering the creation of such a body, even though he says the case is yet to be made. And then the road trip ended at the Financial Review, where Mr Turnbull said he delivered on his promise to revive the economy. He said, well, some of the big distractions this year were not of the government's making. They've largely been dealt with, and next year will be about the people. Interesting, isn't it? Had something for everyone. A little bit of a carrot here and a little bit more carrot over there and some apple over there for the Australian Financial Review. Still on federal politics, and we're told Opposition Leader Bill Shorten is turning voters off in the lead-up to Saturday's Bennelong by-election. Now, the Telegraph reports internal Liberal Party polling conducted last month has found Mr Shorten is repelling voters towards the Liberals more than he's driving voters towards Labor. Now, that was last month. I would have thought, given what's been going on with the likes of Sam Dastyari, and given the fact that he did a massive backflip on citizenship and then had to reveal who was really in trouble within the ALP, I would have thought if that polling was taken this month, not last month, it would have been worse for Labor. The Telegraph also reports a wall of at least 50 signs promoting Labor candidate Christina Keneally were driven into the ground with stakes and fixed to a power pole at West Ryde. And that's despite council law saying the affixing of political advertising posters to electricity poles, fences or any public land is not permitted. And all the parties know that, not just in that particular electorate either. The signs in question were authorised by Ryde Mayor Jerome Laxale, who's also Miss Keneally's campaign manager. However, before we start writing off the likes of Christina Keneally and Bill Shorten and the ALP, we're told the Liberal Party's vote in Bennelong has collapsed. This is a news poll in The Australian. It tells a different story. It's found Labor and the Liberals level pegging on a primary vote of 39%. And for Labor, that's incredible. That's up from 28.5% at last year's election. While for the Liberals, it's down from 50.4% at the election. The two-party preferred vote is now said to be 50-50. Having been 59.7 to 40.3 at the election. I said as soon as Christina Keneally joined this race, all this business about Eddie Obeid and Joe Tripodi, that is so old news in the eyes of the electorate. Now, the poll also asked people about that and Christina Keneally's performance as Premier. 10% said she was one of the best Premiers, 23% said she was better than average, 26% said she was average, 15% said she was below average, and 19% said she was one of the worst. So that seems to fall in line with what I was saying about her introduction into the Bennelong by-election. It would strengthen the Labor vote, and it has done that. Finally, on federal politics, and there's mounting pressure on Labor Senator Sam Double Agent Dastyari to quit politics because of his links to China. Malcolm Turnbull says Bill Shorten's refusal to sack the senator shows he's not fit to be leader, and that is entirely correct. And there's talk that even some of the senator's closest backers in caucus believe Mr Shorten will encourage him to retire from Parliament. I can tell you, it'll be very, very impossible for that to happen before Bennelong on Saturday. And I think Tony Abbott was right when he told my colleague Ray Hadley that it'll happen the moment the punters have been to the polling booth. They'll get rid of him, just not this week. Now, Sydney Trains has apologised to passengers after a day of rail chaos. May I mention a chaos even in the afternoon, despite someone dying at Wentworthville at 6:30am. How does that happen? Now, after 6:30am yesterday, police set up a crime scene for more than 3 hours. And the effects of that spread right across the system and into the evening peak. Not good enough. And not good enough for those who took 3 hours to get home. At one stage, Town Hall Station was closed to prevent passengers entering overcrowded platforms. That's how ridiculous it got. And I'll take your calls in about 15 minutes' time on the open line. And if you were caught in all of that schmozzle, that's part of the backstory. But I wonder what you were told when you were sitting around on platforms for 3 hours. Give us a call on 131873. And Queensland's new look 18-member ministry will be sworn in today as well. She didn't muck around, Premier Palaszczuk. Former Treasurer Curtis Pitt has been dumped, and will become Speaker. He was sort of smiling through gritted teeth, with Deputy Premier-elect Jackie Trad taking over the portfolio. She is the big winner. The Premier, who has become Arts Minister in her first term, will take on trade. So some moving of the deck chairs in Queensland politically. We'll take a break. We'll talk sport with James Willis right after that. It's 10 to 6, 10 to 5 in Queensland. Gee, I tell you what, the promotions department is good to the breakfast program. Again, I've got a Sony Christmas CD pack to give away, 3 of them, during our open line session after the news. Barbara Streisand's music, The Magic Concert, Christmas with Elvis and the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. And that great album, you should have this one, John Farnham and Olivia Newton-John, Friends for Christmas. It's like, 30, 40 years ago we had Bing Crosby's album. John Farnham and Olivia Newton-John is the album you've got to have as an Australian for Christmas. So that pack, 3 of them to give away to callers with something to say in our open line segment straight after the news.
And now a sports update for Swan Security. New wire-free, worry-free home security.
Now, just keep away from me, James Willis. I do have the lurgy, as some listeners have detected. I got some emails yesterday suggesting some elixirs and magic potions, etc.
I'm on the cusp of either getting it or getting over it.
Let me just go away. I'll go right across the other side of the studio.
But how about,
studio here.
We're at the start of summer.
I know. Well, I've got kids. I've got the twins, you see. They're sick all the time. Well, not all the time, but when they are sick, Dad and Mum, they get sick as well.
Yeah, you're powering through that, mate.
Anyway, I'm getting through. I've got tea and we've got lots of things. Now, Manly. This is one of the chores, well, you could call it a chore, that the NRL wanted completed before the end of 2017, right?
Look, it's an interesting one. The NRL investigation has found that Manly had been over the salary cap for the past 5 years in one way or another. What we understand here is the possibility that 2 former players lifted the lid on these breaches worth about $400,000. Sounds like we're talking about a pretty similar situation in a lower scale to what happened at Parramatta last season with illegal third-party payments that weren't declared. Now, we know third-party is such a grey area in the NRL, but basically it's payments outside the salary cap that have to be declared. It sounds like these payments weren't declared to the tune of about $400,000. So the club's facing a fine of $1 million on the spot. No points, as we understand, will be taken.
But why no points? Because I would have thought other fans of other NRL clubs would think, well, hang on, you annihilated Parramatta, they lost their points. Why would you not take points off Manly for doing the same thing?
Look, Chris, you see over the last 5-10 years there's been clubs that have cheated the salary cap in small amounts. Now, Parramatta's rorting was massive, hence why they took 12 points. This is a lot smaller, about $400,000. What the fine will be, and this will be significant, is $400,000 taken from Manly's salary cap next season. So they'll be under the cap by that amount.
So they won't be able to get another halfback or whoever they're looking for at the moment.
That could hurt the signing of Trent Hodkinson or maybe Todd Carney if he's allowed. Okay. But 2 officials, that's all we're being told, are also facing deregistration from the game. Are they current Manly officials? Are they officials that have been at Manly that have gone to another club?
I saw Channel 9 report last night, Neil Breen reporting that they have one of them has left to go to another club.
Right, okay. Well, we know 2 officials are facing deregistration from the game altogether for their involvement in this. I've got a feeling as well, it's in relation to what we saw. The club was investigated and cleared of match fixing by the New South Wales organised crime squad, and as part of that investigation, they found information about illegal payments. It's not against the law, but it's against NRL rules.
Well, it's interesting you say that because you're talking about 2 players blowing the whistle, right?
Former players, that's right.
Well, without naming names, there's one player in particular that has turned on the club socially and officially.
Yep.
And without naming his name, he was also someone who was asked questions in that previous investigation. Who knows what he's done with the NRL? There's
definitely a story as well about a former player that may be involved in this that was given third party and was also owed third party when he left. A significant amount, 6 figures, and that may be involved in all this as well. So that's what's happened. Manly facing a fine of $1 million and the possibility of $400,000 taken from their salary cap for next season.
All right. Now, former Canterbury Bulldogs CEO Raylene Castle, who I didn't mind as an operator, it didn't end well, of course, for her and the Bulldogs, but she may find herself in charge of Rugby Australia.
Well, we understand that she'll be appointed the ARU CEO today, or it was called the ARU. It's now called Rugby Australia officially. There was 2 candidates for this job, Raelene Castle and the former Wallabies captain Phil Kearns, who has a lot of business experience.
Yeah.
But Raelene Castle will be the first female rugby CEO. A bit of a mess to inherit, though, from Bill Pulver. I mean, the game isn't in great shape at the moment, the Western Force issue this year, but I think she'll do a pretty good job. I think she's got the runs on the board. She did a good job at Canterbury.
I thought she did. There were divisions there between the coach and the board and her towards the end, but I don't think you can look at that scenario and think that she would repeat it or whether she was responsible for it.
Just before we go, a thought from you. Talk today, and this has been growing for a couple of weeks now, but Todd Carney and the possibility of him returning to the NRL. He's had 3 chances. He was sacked from the Sharks, he was sacked from the Roosters, he was sacked from Canberra.
Yeah, but more than 3. If you go back into the history, there were 6 or 7 different events that occurred in each club.
So does the NRL allow him back?
I don't think the NRL needs him, to be perfectly honest. Thank you, James. James Willis.
Chris Smith filling in for Alan Jones. Thanks to Vodafone. Want a no lock-in contract? See vodafone.com.au/plans. T's and C's apply.
10 minutes after 6, 10 after 5 in Queensland. I have those 3 Sony Christmas CD packs to give away, and I'll do that to selected callers between now and the bottom of the hour. We'll be looking at this through the course of the morning. Sydney Trains has apologised to passengers after a day of rail chaos, and it followed the death of a person at Wentworthville in Sydney's west. The person died at 6:30 a.m, and police set up a crime scene that lasted for more than 3 hours, which of course they're entitled to do, but that only takes it up to 9:30 a.m, and the effects of all of that spread right across the system and into the evening peak. How does that happen? At one stage, Town Hall Station was closed to prevent passengers entering overcrowded platforms. Were you caught up in the mess? The opposition says it highlights the flaws with the government's new timetable. That and more. It says Minister Andrew Constance needs to give a full explanation as to what happened and provide an assurance that it won't happen again. So give us a call if you're caught up in it. Now, remember the old TV show Malcolm in the Middle? Well, it's Malcolm in the Middle, all right, today. The PM is all over the newspapers like a rash. Interviews with just about everyone on just about everything. Tax cuts, the economy, a federal ICAC, and getting rid of Tony Abbott. Mr Turnbull says his government has been able to deliver some very big achievements this year despite some very big distractions. Talking, of course, about dual citizenship. He cited the same-sex marriage legislation and the energy issue. Would you be putting that on your list of achievements? Really? Remember the lady who called yesterday on the open line about having to use a torch because she couldn't afford her power bill? That was how she got around after the sun went down. And that's been the case for months and months and months. Or the man who called because his power bill was close to 10% higher than his previous one, and he hadn't been home for 38 days of the billing period. He's been in damn hospital. So would you be classing electricity as an achievement? I wouldn't. How would you rate the government's record in 2017? 131873. Before we go any further, I want to return to Sydney Trains and the debacle. I know Brisbane listeners, you've copped it with the same problems, but for different reasons in recent months. Well, now it's happening in Sydney, and there was a fatality at Wentworthville at 6:30 a.m, and then you've got problems in the evening. Work that out. All trains were delayed by between 15 and 30 minutes due to the emergency. The Shadow Transport Minister, Jody McKay, is on the line right now. Jody, thank you very much for your time.
Good morning.
How does that happen? How do you... Even the police left the scene at 9:30 a.m. and opened it all to trains and whatever other services had to be caught up with. How does it still cause a problem in the evening?
Well, I think this is the explanation that Andrew Constance needs to give, because I think most people are asking that question. What he says is that earlier incident then had a ripple effect throughout the day and impacted enormously on the evening peak. But to me, that doesn't hold true. What we know is that the new timetable is causing extreme issues right throughout the Sydney train network, and it has been since it was introduced on the 26th of November. I'd be keen to get the experiences, Alan, of what people are the stories of people from the new timetable, to be honest, because I think that is what caused the problems yesterday, and we know that because we have a leaked document that tells us.
Yeah. Okay, causing problems prior to something like yesterday, but surely we've got a system that's flexible enough to say, okay, over the next hour and a half, those services have been cancelled.
Yeah.
We're now catching up. 1 o'clock will be 1 o'clock now.
Yeah, and I think I think exactly, and this is the problem that Andrew Constance needs to give an explanation about, because, 12 hours later, in the evening peak, we've got mass confusion and a complete meltdown in the system like we haven't seen in a very, very long time. I believe it's the new timetable, and I've been getting anecdotal reports over the last 2 weeks. What this document tells us is that if there is a minor incident or a delay on the network, that it will cause what are cumulative and unrecoverable delays in the evening peak. The Minister has had that information. He knows that was possible, and that is what we saw yesterday afternoon. Okay,
we'll take some open line calls and see if we can get to the bottom of... And also what people were told on platforms, because some of the stuff I saw on social media was flammable. Anyway, Jody McKay, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome, thank you.
Okay, New South Wales Shadow Transport Minister Jody McKay. Look, the public transport system is far from perfect, but it was all clear. Police moved away from the site at 9:30 a.m. yesterday, and we still got complete and utter chaos in the evening. 131873 is the telephone system. I should mention Shanghai Sam. We have each and every other day for the last week and a half. He's got to be balancing like a barnacle on a rock, doesn't he? But the suggestion is the beleaguered Labor senator and friend of China is on the outside, and he could be asked by his leader as early as today to quit politics. Now, the former Labor leader, Kim Beazley, says the senator needs to ask, how do I advance the cause of the Labor Party by being there or going away? I'd suggest most people would be in the going away camp, wouldn't you? But not Labor frontbencher Anthony Albanese, who reckons Shanghai Sam has paid a price for his lack of judgment. Now, that was the first time. The second time, yes, he's paid a price, but come on, Anthony Albanese. He's doing Labor no favours. Fellow Labor Senator Doug Cameron says he supports his colleague remaining where he is. He says, I think a lot of this has been overblown. Has it been overblown? Or do you agree with me to say that he is definitely a double agent, Sam Dastyari? Who's he working for? He's not working for Australia. 131873. Pat in Rooty Hill. Hi there, Pat.
Hello.
G'day.
In one way, I was lucky because I went to work at 5 o'clock in the morning from Rooty Hill to Parramatta.
Yep.
That's fine. Coming home at 4 o'clock, so I'm on the station 4:15, get a train, no indication that there's any problem. The train only gets to Blacktown. I'm trying to get to Rooty Hill. All off. And I'd had a phone call from my workmate who'd actually left work at 11:30, and he rang me while I was on the train at Seven Hills and said, there's a problem on the trains. He couldn't get to Richmond. He had to get off at Blacktown.
So when you got off at Blacktown, what time was that, Pat?
About 4:45.
4:45 in the afternoon?
Yep.
And this problem, apparently it was an apparent suicide, it occurred at 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Ridiculous.
It just happened an hour or so earlier. And
so you waited on Blacktown for how long?
Well, we were shuttled down to buses. All the Richmond people, no trains to Richmond. Well, what's the Richmond line from Blacktown to Richmond got to do with anything at Wentworth?
Yeah, separate line.
Yeah, they could have had shuttle trains between Blacktown and Richmond to get those people out of the way, but they had buses.
So that took you to Richmond, did it?
No, I'm trying to go to Rooty Hill. All these people are down getting buses to Richmond, which are blocking the normal buses. I could have got a normal bus to Rooty Hill from town, but the Richmond buses were in the way. And all the people were lining up to get on them, which was clogging up the busing.
So what did you do?
I waited there for a bus. The normal bus to Rooty Hill didn't come, so I got an alternative bus. But that took an hour. It took me 2.5 hours to get home.
From Parramatta to Rooty Hill?
Yeah, that's normally 1 hour, yeah.
And what time did you walk in the door?
6:30. I just made it to bingo at 7 o'clock at Rooty Hill, RSL.
Well, I'm glad you got to bingo. That's the main thing. But you can't thank the government for that or Sydney Trains. What a joke.
No.
What a joke.
Yeah, yes. So,
Hey, listen, can I make your week a little bit better by giving you one of these Sony Christmas CD packs, Pat?
oh, that would be wonderful.
You are one of our 3 winners this half hour. Barbara Streisand, Christmas with Elvis and John Farnham and Olivia Newton-John. They are all yours. Pat, happy Christmas to you.
Thank you so much.
All right. It's got to get better.
It does.
Thank you, Pat. Stay online. We'll put you through to James and she'll get the first of the CD packs. But how ridiculous is that? Then you wait at Blacktown for an hour to find a bus because the buses have been hijacked by a bus system that has to take people to Richmond, and there's no one there to sort that stuff out. And this is from a 6:30 a.m. problem. Imagine what would happen if someone had made a suicide attempt or there'd been a similar incident at midday. People would still be trying to get home. 131873. Hello, Patricia.
Good morning, Chris.
Morning to you.
How are you?
Very well, thank you.
No, you're sick.
Well, I am, but I'm not sick. It's not a matter of being sick. I'm just full of it, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Some people say that to me about me all the time, really, but you know what I'm full of.
Yeah, I know. You're a fighter. I just want to say regarding Malcolm Turnbull, and now he has said about, this news poll that he used to get rid of Tony Abbott.
Yeah.
He should make amends with Tony Abbott, pocket the pride and give Tony Abbott a ministry.
Imagine if he did, and imagine how many people from the base would return to the party.
That's right. And he needs to get this coal-fired power station, the first one, started.
Or do something to make it happen. He's saying that, we'd be very interested if private enterprise came in and wanted to build one. Well, do something about stoking the fire for that. You can compel and you can entice private enterprise to do that with government's help.
Oh, look, this is just terrible. If we lose energy, we've got nothing in this country.
Yeah, very true.
We might as well all pack up but where do we go?
Yeah, we go back to second world and third world country.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to send you an email about what I think you should use. I've told you before, the vitamin C with hesperidin complex round the clock. I did it in August. I use it all the time, but I got ill myself in August, and I haven't been ill for quite
the vitamin C got you through?
It got me through.
Yeah, I've got this directly from my kids, my little kids, and
I know.
And when you cut,
I've sent you the first birthday card.
Oh, have you, Patricia?
Agnes and Henry.
You're very kind.
Sent a big pack to 2GB yesterday.
I'll look for it, Patricia.
And your card will be in there with the, everything.
Well, can I give you a Sony Christmas CD pack?
Oh well, I got so much music here. It's coming out of the...
No, but you can have this one too, because John Farnham and Olivia Newton-John CD is one to keep forever. Christmas with Elvis and the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, and Barbara Streisand, the Magic Concert. Those 3 are coming your way, Patricia, all right?
You're very kind, Chris.
Don't be silly. Did you go and see Paul McCartney?
I did.
Someone told me when you first rang, you told them about Paul McCartney.
Oh, yes, because I just got out of bed and he wanted me,
I understand. Was it Saturday night you saw him?
Saturday night, and it was just absolutely fantastic.
In Brisbane. Fabulous. I bet it was.
I've seen Adele this year, Paul McCartney, Petula Clark, and the ballet.
What a year of entertainment you've had.
Well, I've had, as I said yesterday, you're a long time dead.
Yes.
It depletes my money. I'm not a rich person, but I try to enjoy what I enjoy.
Well, you're enjoying it all right with the help of some of the greatest stars in the world. The Sony CD pack is yours. Happy Christmas to you, Patricia, and I'll look for the package. Thank you.
Thank you, darling.
All right, 23 minutes after 6, 23 after 5 in Queensland. I've still got another pack to give away. 131873. 3 minutes away from news. I've got the New South Wales Transport Minister, Andrew Constance, on the line right now. Minister, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Chris.
Well, what a stuff-up. You got the railway lines back before 10 a.m. and you still had a problem into the evening. How does that happen?
Yeah, well, look, first of all, a personal tragedy played out. The emergency service personnel needed to go into that station for a number of hours, obviously, as a result of the incident that had occurred there. As a result, banks up trains. Trains aren't where they should be on the network. You've got the resourcing of crews required. You've got bus fleets.
But you got the lines back at 10 a.m.
Yeah, but this is again the problem with it, Chris, is that it literally led to service cancellations throughout the day, led to challenges in the afternoon peak. We're very sorry to the people of Sydney for what happened yesterday, but a personal tragedy which is beyond anyone's control, the flow-on effect across an old network like this has led to the challenge.
A flow-on effect for 7 hours?
Yeah, that's right, Chris.
7 hours?
We had trains where they weren't supposed to be. We had to manage crew resources. And Howard Collins, who's one of the best operators in the world, who's running our network now, said that it had nothing to do with the timetable. It was, as Labor are claiming, it was all to do with the management of having to get staff to get trains back to timetable, to all sorts of things, service cancellations as a result.
But you also got an ease of time to do that. It was in the middle of the day, the slowest time for the train network. If you were going to catch up, it was a great time for this to be cleared.
Yeah, well, they do their level best when this happens, Chris.
Have you really said that to the boss of Sydney Trains, have you? You've done your level best, that's okay?
No, Chris, we spoke at length about this. I mean, I'm obviously...
It's embarrassing. Embarrassing to you personally.
Well, again, the point that I'd make is that we've put more services on. We've got a lot of trains running across the network. This type of incident, shutting down the busiest station for a number of hours, and it had to be shut down. We had emergency service in there doing their job.
It wasn't Granville, it wasn't Strathfield, it was Wentworthville.
Yeah, but it was on the T1 Western Line.
Yeah.
And that's...
So is everything up to speed and back on schedule for this morning?
Yeah, and we've had some great runs over the last couple of weeks. It's, obviously more trains being on the network, and we're according to Howard this morning, it's back to normal.
Right. So according to Howard, are we having a review into what happened?
Yeah, naturally that will happen. But I'm apologetic to what happened yesterday. But again, the point is that we're back to normal today. And, obviously when these incidents happen beyond anyone's control, there is a challenge.
Okay, thank you very much for providing us some time. Andrew Constance, New South Wales Transport Minister. There you go. Maria phoned through. I want to give Maria that last pack, the Sony Christmas CD pack. And we'll do more on the talkback lines just after 8:30, just after 7:30 in Queensland.
Chris Smith filling in for Alan Jones. Thanks to Vodafone. Want a no locking contract? See vodafone.com.au/plans. T's and C's apply.
Good to be here this morning and good to have your company. Let's start with letters to the editor. Gary from Barara writes in the newspaper today, I woke up late last night to the sound of people going through my recycling bin, scavenging for bottles. What a wonderful thing this new recycling scheme is, writes Gary. Like most government ideas of late, I can see very little thought was put into it. Tony Lawrenson from Fennell Bay. Sam Dastyari is becoming to Bill Shorten what Craig Thompson was to Julia Gillard. The Coalition's never-ending best weapon. Time to move on, Sam. And Tony Judge from beautiful Woolgoolga. Despite Malcolm Turnbull's sustained efforts to present himself as the Nelson Mandela of marriage equality, leading the Rainbow Nation out of the darkness of matrimonial apartheid, I still cannot help seeing him as Forrest Gump in someone else's photo. Yes, like most politicians. Malcolm, a photo bomber from way back. 19 to 7 o'clock, 19 to 6. Does look like that, doesn't it, eh? Now, to serious issues and stories that have broken overnight. The New York Police Department has confirmed it has a suspect in custody after an explosion in the area of the Port Authority bus terminal in Manhattan. It's one of Manhattan's busiest commuter hubs, this. Police Commissioner James O'Neill identified the would-be jihadi as 27-year-old Akiad Ullah. He intentionally detonated an improvised low-tech explosive device, injuring 3 nearby people. Police told the New York Post that the bomber was a former New York City taxi driver who told investigators he carried out the attack for revenge. Other reports say he was inspired by Islamic State, but had no contact with that organisation. Ullah reportedly suffered burns to his stomach and hands and was in custody at New York's Bellevue Hospital. The man had wires attached to him and was armed with a pipe bomb and a battery pack, which he tried to set off in the subway around 7:20 a.m. 20 past 11 last night Sydney time. Prime time, peak hour in New York. Local media reported that the suspect was from Bangladesh and lived in Brooklyn, having been in the US for 7 years. The 3 injured people nearby took themselves to hospitals where they reported minor injuries, including ringing to the ears. They are awfully lucky A police spokesman said the device was based on a pipe bomb and affixed to his person with a combination of Velcro and cable ties. Now, the device partially detonated below ground inside the subway passenger way to the N, Q and R trains near 7th and 8th Avenues. For those who know the area, this is on 42nd Street. It was captured on surveillance video. Now, Port Authority is the largest bus terminal in the USA, with about 232,000 commuters passing through each day. There are some very lucky people who have survived all of that. And this fellow says it's all about revenge. How dumb and stupid they are. London police have arrested a 24-year-old man who allegedly tried to climb a wall outside Buckingham Palace. The Metropolitan Police said overnight the suspect didn't have any weapons on him and the incident is not being treated as terrorist-related. He was arrested on Sunday night on suspicion of trespass and suspicion of possessing a controlled substance. The department said its Royalty and Specialist Protection Command arrested the man after he allegedly stepped over a low fence and tried to scale a wall outside the palace. Buckingham Palace is the official home of Queen Elizabeth, although she is often at one of her other residences. Police say the man was given a mental health assessment and released on conditional bail. Well, closer to home, a female teacher has been arrested and charged over historic child sex offences dating back 20 years. Now, police detained the 47-year-old woman after visiting her in Padstow in Sydney's West yesterday. The arrest follows a 10-month investigation into alleged sex offences against a 15-year-old male student at a high school in Birrong in 1997. Police also allege a second 15-year-old boy at the same school was also sexually assaulted by the teacher. The woman was charged with 16 counts of aggravated sexual assault and 5 counts of indecency and bailed to appear in Bankstown Local Court on January 10. Now, investigations are also underway after 2 marked police vehicles were involved in a collision at Granville overnight. They were responding to an urgent job when they collided at the intersection of Parramatta Road and Good Street, Granville, just near the Good Street Bridge, about 9:15 p.m. The senior constable driving one of the vehicles suffered minor injuries and he was taken to Westmead Hospital for treatment. The acting sergeant who was driving the other vehicle was not injured. Rosehill Police will investigate the circumstances of the crash. All right, the truth about what's happening in the bush. Now, we all hear about, great rains falling on one day and maybe a little bit the next, but when you think of it over a longer term, it explains exactly how dry it is still in rural Australia. Australia's farm production is tipped to fall 7% from record levels after dry weather in grain-growing regions affected crops. Now, the latest report from the federal government's agriculture forecaster found after peaking at $63 billion in 2016-17, total production is likely to drop to $59 billion in 2017-18. Now, ABARES, the Australian Bureau of Agricultural and Resource Economics and Sciences, found the reduced prediction is mainly due to lower crop production and prices. It follows an estimated 12% increase in 2016-17 when our winter crops delivered exceptional yields and prices for livestock and wool were quite favourable. So there you go. The value of the farm yield will always fluctuate. It's, I guess, called life on the land. Now, the harness racing scandal, which I told you about yesterday, deepens in Queensland. Detectives have now charged a man with race fixing after he allegedly won thousands of dollars at Albion Park earlier this year. The 65-year-old was arrested on Saturday night. Police allege he made bets on a harness race on July 28 in which he had prior knowledge of a fixing arrangement. And this follows the arrest of Queensland's leading harness driver Shane Graham and 2 others, Leonard Kane and Vicky Rasmussen. They've all been charged with match fixing. Graham, 35, has topped the harness racing industry in Queensland for the past 4 years. His horses have won more than $5 million in prize money. On July 28, Graham won race 2 at Albion Park at the odds of $7. A horse driven by Kane came second. Police allege Kane deliberately gave up his lead. They'll appear in court next year. The maximum penalty for match fixing is 10 years. Now, still on sport, an extraordinary story ahead of Jeff Horn's return to the boxing ring. Horn will fight Britain's Gary Corcoran at the Brisbane Convention Centre tomorrow night. Now, it's his first bout since he upset Manny Pacquiao. But Horn's wife, Jo, is heavily pregnant, due on January the 1st. She's refused to stay at home. and will be ringside. So one of Australia's leading obstetricians has been called in to be by her side. Dr. Brad Robinson from Greenslopes Private Hospital. He'll be there. Right on ringside. He's lucky. Unless, of course, a baby emerges. Dr. Robinson said there was a 30% chance Joe could go into labour this week. An ambulance will also be waiting out the front to cart Joe off to hospital should the baby arrive early. I hope it doesn't arrive instantly. But what a distraction that could be for Jeff Horn. You know, you're looking at your opponent, then you're looking over your wife, making sure that she's okay, or whether she's gone into labour. Good luck, Jeffrey. And this is good news. The owner of the World War I medals found on a street in Sydney's west at the weekend has been located. A man spotted a brown wooden box on the road at the intersection of Carolyn Chisholm Drive and Langdon Road, Winston Hills, last Saturday. There were original World War I medals in good condition inside. Now, the Seven Hills men handed in the items to Quakers Hill Police. Following an appeal on Sunday, the owner of the medals contacted Riverstone Police Station yesterday. The medals belonging to the owner's great-grandfather were stolen during a break-and-enter at a home last week. She was happy to have them returned. I bet she was. Inquiries into the break-and-enter are continuing, but well done to all those who responded to all our public pleas for a connection to the medals, and well done to the police involved as well. It's 11 minutes to 7 o'clock, 11 to 6 in Queensland. Chris Smith for Alan Jones. 7 minutes to news time.
And now on the Alan Jones Breakfast Show, the Stock Market Report.
And welcome to Tuesday, December 12. The Dow Jones is trading 31 points higher. The Nasdaq is trading 32 points higher. The Standard & Poor's is trading 6 points higher. The Nikkei has closed 127.7 points higher. The Shanghai Composite has closed 66.1 points higher. The FTSE has closed 59.5 points higher. Oil is $76.85 Australian a barrel, and that is $57.89. 1 Australian dollar is worth 75.33 US cents, and gold is trading at $1,246 30 cents an ounce.
On the Alan Jones Breakfast Show, national weather.
For Darwin today, a possible shower or storm in Hobart and Canberra, partly cloudy. Melbourne becoming sunny and mostly sunny in Perth and Adelaide. A partly cloudy day for Brisbane, slight chance of a shower, top temperature of 29. Patchy early fog for Sydney, then a mostly sunny day, top of 27 in the city and 34 in the west. And how's this? London, sunny. If they're lucky, 2 degrees.
The UK Report, thanks to Peters of Kensington. Open 7 days at Barangaroo, Birkenhead Point in Kensington. Or shop online at petersofkensington.com.au.
Same old, Adam Gilchrist, the full Arctic blast coming your way.
Hi, Chris. Yeah, we've had quite a day of it. I mean, although there hasn't been much fresh snowfall today, it's all the knock-on effect from yesterday, but still a quarter of flights at Heathrow cancelled, the port of Calais closed for some time, drivers warned about treacherous conditions, schools are shut today and some will be shut tomorrow. 140,000 homes were without power this time yesterday. It's now down to 7,000 or 8,000 without power, but imagine that in these sorts of temperatures, 30 centimetres of snow, but minus 15 tonight in some parts, and that's not, on mountaintops in Scotland. That's in some places in northern England. Admittedly, London is meant to be minus 3, so minus 3 is balmy compared with minus 15.
Yeah.
Just a bit crazy at the moment. But then, I suppose it's winter. We should kind of expect it.
Yeah, it's same old, all right. A disease breakthrough.
Yeah, this is very exciting, very positive news for sufferers of Huntington's. It's a neurodegenerative disease that's especially aggressive and devastating for people who get it. And indeed, some patients have described it. It's almost impossible to know if, of course, you don't know somebody with it, but some patients say it's like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and motor neuron disease all in one. It's a really nasty thing. Now, an experimental drug injected into the fluid of the spine has slowed change, in some cases actually reversed Huntington's. A team at University College London that developed a drug. It's very clever. Basically, what they've done is they've worked out a way of re-messaging a protein in the brain so that the problem with Huntington's is it gets waylaid, so this protein makes killer cells instead of healthy ones, and they've worked out a way of correcting that so that the protein goes back to making healthy ones instead of killer cells and so forth. I've obviously oversimplified, but still, terribly good news. 8,500 sufferers in the UK, but many, many tens of thousands worldwide. And often it hits people in their prime, in their 30s and 40s.
Oh.
So let's hope this really is the breakthrough that they claim.
Wonderful, hopeful development. Fantastic. Britain's new highest mountain. How does Britain have a new highest mountain?
Well,
Do they grow, do they?
Well, if you look around the British Isles, if you look on a map, you go, well, there aren't very many big mountains. I mean, Ben Nevis is acknowledged as being the biggest, and it's, 1,300 feet or something? It's not particularly high. It's still a mountain. It still gets gold up there. No, well, the new highest mountain is because if you extend Britain into the Antarctic, and the bit of Antarctica that is ours, they've got out a big tape measure. Actually, technically speaking, they've got out a big satellite measure and worked out that Mount Hope at 3,200 metres or 10,500 feet is taller than first thought and head and shoulders above anything in the UK. So that's our newest mountain, albeit not technically in the British Isles.
What's this, grasping at straws to get into the Guinness Book of Records or something?
Well, it's not nowhere near the tallest mountain in the world, but no, I think we're probably just saying, oh, look, well, I think actually one of the reasons is that they've started recalibrating all the mountains in Antarctica and working out they're actually quite a bit higher than they thought, and that probably is quite helpful for aeroplanes so they don't bump into them.
Oh, right, okay.
That's really where it's coming.
There's some use for this, right?
Possibly.
Yeah, I'm with you.
You never know.
It seems like a waste of time. Thank you, Adam.
Cheers, guys.
Adam Gilchrist, a new highest mountain for Britain, but it's not really in Britain, although it's Britain in Antarctica.
And now, a sports update.
James Willis, Manly, under scrutiny, I guess you could say, but also under scrutiny officials who may not necessarily be in the club at the moment.
Yeah, what we understand firstly is that two former players lifted the lid on the salary cap breaches, where Manly, we're told, have been over the salary cap for the past 5 seasons. It's worth about $400,000. It sounds like we're talking about a similar situation to what Parramatta did last season with illegal third-party payments. The amount of money is nowhere near as big as what the Eels did, but the club is still facing a fine, this is Manly, of $1 million, and the illegal payments, around $400,000, are likely removed from next year's salary cap.
So answer me this question. It may not have ever been detected, and Manly would have gotten away with it if it weren't for two players who went to the NRL.
Well, or who went or were part of this organised crime squad investigation, which was initially looking into match fixing.
Yep.
The club was cleared of match fixing, but the police may have found instances where there was salary cap rorting, which isn't against the law, but is against NRL rules. So that's been passed over. Stories you hear out of the club, though, are there's some former players that were owed third-party payments, promised them, never received them, and now have their noses out of joint.
Okay, very quickly, is there anyone left in the English cricket team in Australia?
I think the coach might still be here, a few Barmy Army supporters, but they take on the Wacker, and apparently it wasn't just one player, Ben Duckett, who was pouring beers over others' heads, it was the whole team.
Oh.
So do we send them all home, or
Yeah,
what?
send them all home. We'll find some better opposition. Thank you, James. James Willis. 8.5 minutes after 7 o'clock. So good to have your company today as we get closer and closer to Christmas. Have you done your shopping? You have got days to do it. But I can tell you, having done a little bit yesterday, it's getting very busy out there, so take it easy. Watch out for all that road rage in those car parks. Now, we wake this morning to papers full of hubris from the Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. He's featured in both the Fairfax and News Limited papers, talking up his government at the end of the parliamentary year. I guess they all do it. He's talking up the possibility of a federal commission against corruption, which isn't a bad idea. He's talking about promoting young talent in a new year cabinet reshuffle. And yes, the cabinet could do with a clean-out. He says 2018 will be a year of tax cuts. Bring it on, but how are you going to pay for it? And the front page of the Australian today tells a different story to all of that. We're told the Liberal Party's primary vote in Bennelong has collapsed. The latest news poll has the Coalition and Labor in a tight race for the previously safe Liberal seat. They're both polling 50% on a two-party preferred basis. It's an 11-point slide in the Liberal primary vote since last year's election. If repeated, when voters go to the polls this Saturday, it would be too close to call the race between Labor's Christina Keneally and the Liberal incumbent, John Alexander. Now, Mr Turnbull rolled then Prime Minister Tony Abbott back in September 2015, and he cited 30 bad news polls as his motivation. Well, today he says he regrets that decision. He says, today, I do regret having said it, only because it allowed people to focus on that rather than the substantive reasons. He said, the substantive reasons I stated were related to economic leadership and governance. Economic leadership and governance. We're in record debt, and the Coalition has done nothing about it. Parliament has been preoccupied with same-sex marriage while debt creeps up over $80,000 million. Malcolm Turnbull doesn't get it. If he and the coalition keep going the way they're going, Bill Shorten, Sam Dastyari, Tony Burke and all the other key players in the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd debacle will be back leading the country. And the figures in Bennelong tell the story. Malcolm Turnbull has to take the gloves off, get down and dirty and fight for the people. The economic future of the country is at stake. 14 minutes after 7, 14 after 6 in Queensland. Well, the Prime Minister is Eddie everywhere today. More interviews than a job placement agency. He's talking about the economy and tax cuts and a federal ICAC and his regrets at using the news poll excuse when he got rid of Tony Abbott. Malcolm Turnbull says, I do regret having said it only because it allowed people to focus on that rather than the substantive reasons. Well, that was a prime substantive reason, he said at the time. Anyway, he says those substantive reasons related to economic leadership and governance. On top of that, we have Shanghai Sam Dastyari clinging on to his place in the Senate, although the suggestion is the screws are tightening and he could be forced to fall on his sword maybe as early as this week. But Tony Abbott has got it right. They'll get rid of Sam as soon as Bennelong is out of the way. All this as some voters prepare to go to the polls on Saturday in the Bennelong by-election. Now, at the last election last year, John Alexander won the seat with 59.7% of the two-party preferred vote. Labor's two-party preferred vote was a long way back, 40.3%. Now, according to the latest news poll, it's 50-50. But while Labor's vote has shot up since the election, we're also told how Labor leader Bill Shorten is on the nose with voters. The Telegraph reports internal Liberal Party polling conducted last month has found Mr Shorten is repelling voters towards the Liberals more than he's driving voters towards Labor. Shari Markson is the national political editor for the Daily Telegraph, and I've got her online right now. Shari, welcome.
Morning, Chris.
Yes, to Bennelong in a second, but what do you make of the Prime Minister? More appearances yesterday than, Paul McCartney on the current Australian tour. What do you think the rationale is behind all of that?
Look, it's true. He did all of his end-of-year interviews yesterday, so I was in his office, a few other newspapers, and then he did Q&A last night and our new Miranda Devine radio show at the Daily Telly as well. Look, he's ended the year on a big high note. He was trailing, he was struggling up against Shorten's tactics for most of the year, and then the last week in Parliament was really quite successful for him, both on a policy front and in terms of delivering a blow to Bill Shorten on the dual citizenship issue, and of course on Dastyari, as you were just speaking about. So he wanted to celebrate it, and he's done that by a whole wide range of interviews yesterday.
And I think in general, with the same-sex marriage vote, you've got those swinging voters who would see that Malcolm Turnbull made it happen. Whether that's true or not is debatable, but those swinging voters who are trying to work out who to vote for would probably see that he was responsible.
And for him, the biggest win is getting this thorny issue out of the government side. It had really divided the coalition, divided the Liberal Party and the coalition for the best part of a decade. And so finally, that's an issue that has been cleared for him. There'll be no more party room meetings consumed for hours on end, up to 6 hours at a time, debating whether they should have same-sex marriage or not. So just getting it done and out the way, as well as energy policy, is really quite significant.
All right. As I said earlier, he spoke about his regret at his comment on Tony Abbott and the news polls, and you can understand why. He's well on the way to matching Mr Abbott's record and even beating it, and he wants to cover his backside before he gets there, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we all kind of knew he must have secretly, deeply regretted saying it, but he'd never admitted it before until he did last night with Miranda Devine. His 24 news polls, he'll reach the 30 mark, early next year, and it'll give a lot of his enemies, the momentum or the excuse to possibly mount a challenge if he hasn't improved in terms of his leadership, if they don't have growing confidence in him, by that point. And a lot of that will depend on the Bennelong by-election this weekend.
Yeah, so he's focusing on the fact that he's shown economic leadership, he's shown governance, and I wonder whether we can really say that for sure and certain. I think he's probably gilding the lily just a little, isn't he?
Well, he points to, unemployment figures that are, the best they've been since 2013, and he says that there are more than 1,000 jobs are grown every single day. So, he points to those economic factors and also the NAB Business Confidence Index as showing, his improvement in the economy. Look, the most telling thing, although it's quite a few years away, will be whether this government can actually get the budget back into surplus or move in that direction, or whether it's, Scott Morrison will just be another treasurer in this long list who has promised, returning the budget to balance and will be unable to do so. In his interviews yesterday, Turnbull said they're still aiming for a 2021 surplus. We can't imagine he'll be Prime Minister by then, but is also planning on having both income tax cuts next year, which he'll announce in the budget, and also committing to the business tax cuts.
Despite having a debt level in excess of $80,000 million, I don't know how he's going to do that. He must be a magician. To Bennelong, I mentioned the news poll showing the two-party preferred vote locked at 50-50. How does it sit with what you're hearing is occurring in Bennelong?
Very, very tight, and there's a news poll in the Australian today that it mirrors the one that we had in the Daily Telly at the start of the campaign a couple of weeks ago. It's just so tight. The 50-50 was, the two-party preferred was 50-50 then. It still is now. Yeah. Labor's primary has come up. Both primary votes for Labor and Liberal Party is at 39. So this really, the most significant thing about this news poll is how, the fact that the Australian Conservatives hold 7% of the vote. So this is the same pattern that we saw in the Queensland state election recently, where the Conservative parties are weakening the Liberal Party's primary vote. And that's why, people like Cory Bernardi and Pauline Hanson are going to continue to be such a big issue for the Liberal Party.
I just wonder if Labor gets in, if Christine Keneally can pull this off, what does that mean for the shape of the parliament?
Look, based on these results, I don't think she would get in, because you'd have to, Cory Bernardi has said he's going to preference the Christian Democrats, not the Liberal Party, but you'd have to think with preference flows, the Liberals will just fall over the line. Yeah.
But maybe we get Christina Keneally anyway when Sam Dastyari goes and she is piloted into a Senate seat.
Absolutely.
She can't lose.
No, but that's for sure. So there's all this talk and speculation that Sam's going to go out with the Christmas trash and, and they'll replace his Senate spot with Keneally. Look, one way or another, I'm sure she's going to find her way into the halls of Canberra, in the next couple of years. Yeah. And look, it seems that voters have, forgotten her history and the government she led, and she's quite remarkably transformed her image.
Yeah. All right, tell us about this polling you've got your hands on.
So this was internal Liberal Party research that they conducted in November, and they did some on the weekend as well. And it shows that Bill Shorten is really quite a turn-off for voters in Bennelong, so that whenever he turns up to the electorate, and he's been there 8 times, he actually encourages people to vote for the Liberal Party. Such is his
He's a turn-off.
Absolute turn-off. Repels voters. It shouldn't be a surprise. We see in poll after poll that despite the Turnbull government trailing Labor, in terms of the preferred Prime Minister rating, the PM always leads Shorten. So it's quite amazing that he's been, a bigger problem for Keneally than he has helping her in those 8 occasions when he's turned up.
So clarify something for me. If we take what has occurred in Parliament in the last week and a half that they sat, I would have thought it was a huge loss to Bill Shorten's credibility. So does this internal Liberal Party polling take in that period?
So this was before the last week of Parliament. This was in late November, this research.
So you would have thought if you'd done similar polling based on, say, 4 days ago, it would be even worse for Bill Shorten.
You'd have to think so. You're right. The last week in Parliament really exposed duplicity and his ability to mislead the public because, as you know, he gave a guarantee. He used the word guarantee that there were no dual citizens in his ranks, that Labor's vetting processes were perfect. Well, they're not. And only 2 have been referred. And then of others that should be.
Correct. And then coupled with that, an inability to get rid of a fellow who got him there in the first place, Sam Dastyari. Before you go, talk about Shanghai Sam. He's a goner, but when?
Good question. Look, they were not wanting to move on him before the Bennelong by-election because, it'll be too much of a political sore point. But at this point, it is proving to be a distraction. And the most, significant, or the biggest change that we saw yesterday is that there were Labor frontbenchers coming out publicly and saying that Sam Dastyari needs to consider his future in the party. Of course, a lot of the people who were coming out were Labor factional enemies.
Yeah.
Sam, people on the left in the New South Wales Labor Party or on the Victorian right. But nonetheless, having Labor politicians speaking out against, their boss's wishes, Bill Shorten would have hated that. It shows that there really is this momentum on, and it's going to become an internal issue if Shorten doesn't deal with it.
Yeah, I wonder whether this is Bill Shorten just sticking with someone who got him into that position as a gesture of thanks, or whether it's Shorten thinking to himself, I might need Dastyari before the next federal election because things might get shaky for me. Maybe both.
Well, you know what else? It's that, yes, Dastyari was freestyling. He asked the 115 questions that I reported on last week and, passed on counter surveillance advice. But when it comes to the donations, that was very much within the full knowledge of Bill Shorten and of Tony Burke, and driven, by Bob Carr, who's very much in there in terms of cozying up to the Chinese as well.
Yeah.
He works for a Chinese think tank that's very much linked with government money. So that's another reason why it's hard for Shorten to move on Sam, or why he's been resisting, because he's been a party to the donations from companies that are linked to the Chinese government that our security agencies are just so worried about.
Yeah. All right. Shari, thank you very much. You got yourself some hell of an indication about what may happen in Bennelong. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right. The National Political Editor of the Daily Telegraph, Shari Markson.
Chris Smith, right across Australia.
Coming up to 26 minutes after 7, 26 after 6 in Queensland. We know the dream of home ownership in Australia is, well, it's more like a nightmare for most people. The median dwelling price in Sydney is more than $904,000. In Melbourne, it's more than $718,000. And in Brisbane, it's just shy of $491,000. So in the context of all of that, I reckon this is a great idea for people trying to get a foot into the market. They call it Covesta. Covesta. It's described as a fractional investment property platform that brings potential buyers together in syndicates. So while you mightn't be able to afford the usual 20% deposit, you might be able to afford, say, 5% of the purchase price if you're part of a syndicate. You buy the property in 1% blocks, with buyers deciding how many blocks they'll buy. Daniel Noble is the CEO of Covesta, and he's on the line. Daniel, welcome to the program.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
That's okay. Where did the idea come from?
Well, look, there's millions of Australians blocked out of the market, and my mother-in-law was one of them. And the closest we can get her to the Aussie dream was about an hour and a half out of Sydney CBD. And when I realised that, I thought there's got to be a better way to help people get their foot in the door.
Right, so this is a part of it. So the process is you register on the Covesta platform, which I guess is short for co-investor. Investors can search and view any property for sale nationwide. And then how does it work?
Well, very simply, every property is sold up to 100 blocks. You find a property you like, you decide how much you want to own, you reserve your position. Once the syndicate's closed, we'll go out and secure that property for you, and you become a property co-owner. And it's just like being a direct property owner, but you're doing it with a bunch of people in a syndicate.
Okay, so the entire 100 blocks have to be purchased before it's sold?
That's correct. So what we do here is we bring people together that want to get in the market but can't. They've got a certain amount of money that they can invest with. So we use those funds as part of the syndicate and allows them to get a foothold in the market.
Okay, so give us an idea on price. Firstly, is there an annual fee that will allow me to be in on the platform, firstly?
No, it's free to come to the platform. It's free to search and find a property you'd like to invest in or join a syndicate.
Right.
You pay a fee when you invest in a syndicate. It's 2.5% fee, platform fee.
Right.
And after that, it's $75 per annum for every block you own as an account management fee.
Okay, $75 per block you own.
That's correct.
And give us the price of a property and how much a block might be worth.
Okay, well, let's just use $1 million property for Sydney. Okay, that property with all fees and charges and stamp duties and conveyancing, everything bundled into it, will cost you about $10,900 per block.
Yep.
So what that means when you pay that fee, there's no extra cost. It's all the acquisition costs, all the conveyancing costs, all the setup fees, and then we'll rent that property out for you as well.
And then down the track when you sell it, what happens?
On the 5th anniversary, the property will be sold, unless you all vote to roll it over for another 5 years, but it'll be sold, and all capital gains are distributed to all investors in their proportion.
So why the 5th anniversary? Why does it need to be sold then?
Well, look, according to the ATO, 80% of all properties in Australia are held for 5 years. It gives people that's the first point where a capital gain can be achieved. Now, also for investors, they want to know that they're not locked in for an unbelievably long amount of time. So 5 years was that kind of point that everyone felt comfortable with.
Right.
But they can opt to roll it over for longer.
Okay, so you're only committed for 5 years, which for most people might be a really good thing. What sorts of returns on their investments can people expect?
Well, the comparison here is the return they'd make, say, in the savings account compared to a property. So the national average return for a rental yield is about 3.5%, and it's about the same for capital gain nationally. So that total returns of about 7% per annum, compared to possibly a 1 or 1.5% return in their savings account.
Yeah. It's a lot more than what we can get elsewhere. You've also got something called invest and rent option, but people can get hold of all of that and what we've just spoken about by going to Covesta, covesta.com.au. So interesting. Daniel Noble, good luck with it.
Thanks for having me.
CEO of Covesta.
Chris Smith filling in for Alan Jones. Thanks to Vodafone. Want a no locking contract? See vodafone.com.au/plans. T's and C's apply.
I've got a book in front of me that says Hinch versus Canberra, Behind the Human Headlines. The human headline himself is walking into the studio, so we'll get to him in just a second. Now, Liberal candidate Jim Molan's bid to take up a Senate seat, it's hit a bit of a hurdle as the High Court seeks to work out whether he has a 3 or 6 year term ahead of him. Now, the Senate agreed after the 2016 double dissolution election that 6-year terms would go to the first 6 senators elected in each state and 3-year terms to the bottom 3. Now, in New South Wales, this meant coalition senators Maurice Payne, Arthur Sinodinos and Fiona Nash, they were given 6-year terms, and Concetta Fierravanti-Wells and John Williams had 3-year terms. Ms Nash has found to be disqualified, as we know, by the court in October over dual citizenship. She was to be replaced by the next coalition candidate on the 2016 election ticket, Holly Hughes. But Ms Hughes was found by the court to be disqualified because of her job with the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. Jim Molan was candidate number 7. It's like Stephen Bradbury at the Olympics. He now has to wait until December 22 to find out if he'll get a 3-year or 6-year term. It is beyond a joke, but at least he's in there, which is good news for those who support and admire Jim Molan. And think about this while you're still stewing after last night's monster commute home in Sydney, and we've taken calls on that earlier today. More than 25,000 state public servants in New South Wales are working from home. The Telegraph reports today fat cats are the fastest growing category in the public service, with numbers surging nearly 15% in the past 4 years. The number of middle-ranking public servants grew by 9%. 1 in 12 public servants work from home this year, and 1 in 3 used flexible start and finish times. 6% work longer days in return for a shorter week. Gee, that deal's done, aren't there? 13% work part-time and 9% work from different locations. The report shows that public servant wages account for nearly half the government's costs, with the median salary now $83,689. Your tax dollars at work. It could be worse. You could be a Queenslander and putting up with a public service that blows out by the day. And finally, this is the most gruesome mystery I've come across for many a day. Another severed foot, encased in a running shoe, has mysteriously washed up on the coast of the Salish Sea between Canada and the US. 18 feet in total have been discovered in this region over the past decade. The latest discovery was made by a man walking his dog in British Columbia on December 8. Of the 18 feet and shoes found, only 2 have been matched together. In a bizarre twist, all of the shoes involved are the same brand, New Balance. What do you make of that? 18 shoes, 18 human feet inside, washed off on the coast between Canada and the US. A gruesome mystery. Now, if you have sleep apnea and you use a CPAP machine, you'll know one of the biggest issues is the mask. They may fit poorly, they leak, or are simply uncomfortable to wear. But Australian company Apnea Seal has developed a new mask technology that could transform the way you sleep. Now, Apnea Seal uses a simple and quick 3D face mapping process. Now, I've done this myself. It's like a machine that takes photographs. It's done in a minute, captures 20,000 data points on your nose and face, enabling them to develop a custom-made mask just for you. The result is a mask that fits the contour of your nose and face. It's exceptionally light, comfortable to wear, and to book an appointment at your nearest Apnea Seal studio, call this number, 1300 214 070, or the website apneaseal.com.au, apneaseal.com.au.
Chris Smith, right across Australia.
17 to 8 o'clock, 17 to 7 in Queensland. Federal Parliament has risen for the year. We've been talking about the everywhere man, Malcolm Turnbull, doing the rounds yesterday. They're off the leash. Now, most people think, well, that'd be a sigh of relief for most of them, but there's still work to be done in their electorates, even if you're a senator in your state. And to coincide with the end of the parliamentary year, a new book has been released. It's called Hinch versus Canberra, Behind the Human Headlines. It's, of course, by Senator Derryn Hinch. His biography describes him as someone who was a journalist, broadcaster, author, and ex-crim. He spent more than 50 years in the media before last year launching Derryn Hinch's Justice Party and being elected to the federal parliament. He says of Hinch versus Canberra, "This is one book I never dreamed I'd write or even be in a position to write." Senator Derryn Hinch joins me in the studio right now. Thank you so much for coming in.
Chris Smith, good morning.
Great stuff. You're looking terrific, given the fact that you've been through one big year.
It has been a big year, huge year. Now, I want to go back first up. Jim Molan, that story you're talking about in the High Court. I know more about that than anybody. And it is bullshit that they said the first 6 senators get 6-year terms, because according to the Electoral Commission, I was number 6 in Victoria. I should have got a 6-year term. It's not a constitutional issue. It's a Senate decision, and the Libs and Labor made a deal. And the deal was they'd push me back to 3 years and give it to Scott Ryan, another Liberal in Victoria, and they'd screw Lee Rhiannon up here in New South Wales, and she'd get only 3 years when she should have got 6, and give 6 years to O'Neill. And it's a deal done
between the major parties.
And you have nothing to do. We thought about going to the High Court over this, and in the end I said, no, I got my 3 years, I'll recontest. But the interesting thing here, if Molan gets pushed back to 3, what they can always do, a party can rejiggle its own list and then put it before the Senate and see if they get a majority vote in the Senate says X gets 6 and X gets 3. They can do that.
Sounds like Rafferty's rules.
Well, this makes me interested because I saw in a restaurant the night of the same-sex marriage debate when Abbott fled this thing rather than cast a vote. I saw a dinner trio, and it was Brian Loughnane, Tony Abbott, and Jim Molan. What were they talking about?
Interesting.
There we are.
Now,
okay,
how did this happen? You ask, how the hell did this happen? Given your pet projects, you should have landed in the Victorian Parliament. Really?
Maybe, but look, federal issues are big issues. You've got to get all the states have got together, say on the thing like a national register of convicted sex offenders. That would be national. Now, the first thing we did achieve this year was national, and that was I got Michael Keenan, the Justice Minister, the Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop, and the Prime Minister to agree to a national travel ban, passport ban, on all convicted child sex offenders.
Great win.
From going to child rape. They were going to child rape holidays.
Yeah.
You know?
How many? 250 or something you wrote about?
No, there were. I found out it was Rachel Griffiths, the actress, who sent me a note saying, "We don't let bankrupts go overseas. How can convicted sex offenders?" And I said, "I don't believe it's true." Went to Canberra, found it was, and found out that 800 went overseas a year. 350 of them went to Myanmar, Cambodia, Philippines, Indonesia on these child rape holidays.
Wow.
And it's now stopped.
Have you noticed that you are starting to talk like a politician? I noticed.
Not.
No, sometimes on Sky you'll say, I know it sounds like I'm speaking like a politician.
and then start speaking like one.
Because that is, what I'm saying is sometimes qualified and maybe a little verbose. Have you noticed yourself getting into that speech?
Yeah. My partner Natasha, she said to me, "Oh, you sound like a politician." Your answer's getting longer, I think is what she said. Your answer's getting longer, yeah. Hey, this is like old home week, because sitting here with you, an ex-Hinch reporter.
Yeah.
And yesterday I was sitting next door to Angela Bishop on Studio 10, an ex-Hinch reporter. Yeah. So, years ago. So.
Do you miss that side of what you did, or are you a politician now until the end of the day?
No, because people keep saying, "Hey, you're not a journalist." I am. I mean, I named a convicted a rapist stalker in Victoria, and they suppressed his name. He was stalking female doctors. They couldn't name him. So I named him in Parliament. Now, that's the sort of thing I would have done in the past and gone to jail for. This time I can do it with immunity and impunity.
In some ways, having the background that you've had, is actually a good skill to have in the Parliament, right?
It's fantastic. You know why? I'll tell you two reasons. One is this, Labor Party's full of union guys who've made it up and through the ranks, and it's your turn. And in the Liberal side, it's staffers, and you're so-and-so staff, you're so-and-so chief of staff, and you're next on the list. So that's number one. Number two, during question time, you see them get up there, they're handed the questions, it's your turn, they read question one, whatever the answer is, they read question two, they read question three. I try and take a question two out of the answer they gave you or didn't give you. So that's the journalist coming out and saying, you didn't answer the question, but you did say X, and jump on that and fight it that way.
I'm interested, when I read your book, it said that you walked down the corridor on that first day, and you go into great detail about that first day. It's a great read. And then you say you felt the awe and responsibility of it all. That surprises me that you felt that way.
Well, it's less people have been a senator, male and female in Australia, I think, that have worn the baggy green. And when you get there, before you even go into Parliament, you go to the usher with the black rod, and she gives you a little gold pass. And it's, in the old days, only men were senators, and you wore it on your fob, and you flashed it to get free rides on the trains. I don't think it'd work on Opal or Mikey, I don't think so. But anyway, and it was a moment of thinking, and you look down on your desk and there's your name on this desk and think, this is awesome. Yeah. And I represent now 6 million Victorians.
It means something.
It does. It means a lot, you know. Yeah. But the journalist in you never dies, you know. Yeah. And obviously the writer doesn't either, because I just love writing. So.
You continue to write. Now, you fell asleep during the Governor-General's opening speech. At the same time as you were saying, hang on, we've got to make sure that senators can be photographed in the chamber, like the lower house.
Well, Paul Barry claimed...
It was a setup, Darren, come on.
No, I've got to... No, it didn't. I actually fell asleep. Because the thing was, if they'd taken that on day two, they couldn't have filmed it.
Yeah.
Because it would have been illegal. But this had special dispensation, it was opening day. But on day two, it wouldn't be able to be photographed. So they've been campaigning for 25 years to get this, and I said, the old Julius Sumner Miller, why is this so? And we went after it, and I can tell you a little inside story how we got it across, because if one senator said no, as Stephen Conroy always used to do, because he was caught playing a game of coconut pineapple crush or I don't even know, some stupid game in the Senate, and he would always say no. And I knew that if one senator says no, it doesn't get through. So and I knew One Nation, Buffhead Burston hates me, so I knew that he's your man.
Brian Burston.
Yeah, lots of luck. Anyway, I knew that he would vote against me anyway. So, and One Nation really turned up in the chamber. And so we'd planned this issue was going to come about 5 o'clock. So about 20 to 12, I talked to then President Stephen Parry and said, can we sort of slip this one on early? And walked into a nearly empty chamber, and he gave me the call, and I put the motion that was passed on the voices, and we're in.
You're getting stuck into the major parties for doing deals. That's a deal, if you ask me. You've also been...
But come back to that. If we hadn't done that, you would not have ever seen that wonderful picture of Penny Wong hugging Dean Smith, because it would have been illegal. And history would have been lost.
Isn't that interesting? I want to ask you about the fact that politicians like Julia Gillard never actually admitted that she made mistakes. She never was able to say, I got that wrong, I'll do it better this time. You admitted to a couple of rookie errors in 2007.
The backpacker tax.
Yes, but Darren, you've got to do that as a politician to retain the trust of the electorate, I think.
Because they know you
Not enough people do that.
They know you made a mistake.
But they don't wake up to that.
No, you should say, the backpacker tax, I was naive because I supported the government on a do it quickly because it's boring, but 19% or something, 20%, I said, yeah, I'll go for it, and voted with the government. Then we're going to 15, and I walk into the room and I suddenly find that Lionhelm's switched to the Jackie Lambie 10.5, and suddenly the government doesn't have the numbers. So I thought, I'd rather have 10.5 than nothing. So I tried to help the government out, got trapped on the wrong side, and then I managed to try to rebuild it, got it back up to 13%, and got Labor to agree to it, Greens to agree to it, and they said, no, you're not going to back off. I said, no, I'm fine. And the Greens did the deal with the government.
Comedy capers.
Yeah.
Tell us about the view of the federal budget from inside, as opposed to the old days that people don't remember. There were parties. There was a lot of frivolity going on. Journalists used to have a beer when they were in the lockup.
There used to be booze served in the lockup, that is true. And then the greatest party, the best party throw on budget night was when John Howard was treasurer. You see Howard up there dancing around at 1 o'clock in the morning, you know. I remember one classic one when it was during the French tests of Moureau and stuff like that, and I was there, and Hawke came up to me very pleased with Keating's budget, and he said, no, something. And I said, yeah, but what about the French in Moureau, the nuclear tests? And he said, I don't like the effing French either. So that was my budget story next day.
That's great.
Next day, and some poor, the French ambassador apparently was in Brisbane, and his whole press conference or some other thing was all about why doesn't the Prime Minister like you?
Yeah. You write that you didn't like the postal survey on the Marriage Act.
Yep.
I like it, and I like the fact that I had a say in it.
Okay. My vote knocked out the plebiscite.
Yep.
And I think John Howard, when he brought it in 2004, make it man and a woman, which is mainly aimed at stopping foreign marriages, being recognised in Australia. That's what he's scared of, that the courts would overrule him. So he brought that in, and Labor supported it without going to the people at all. They changed the Marriage Act completely.
Yep.
And Menzies let you have a conscience vote when he allowed no-fault divorce, which changed our marriage more than anything. So when the postal vote came up, and we see this, I was opposed to that too, because I thought the politicians should do their job. Now I'll tell you, the fact that 80% of Australians voted in the biggest survey we've ever had, and that more than 62% said yes, it gives it far more clout than if just politicians had brought it through. I agree with
Let's leave it at that. Right. Tony Abbott, the day he told you to shut the F up.
Yep.
You write about that in the book. A lot of people don't believe that he would have said that.
Well, he said it, and I played it to my staff saying, who do you think this is? And I would never leave a message like that on anybody's answering service. Yeah. Hey, one quick thing.
Yeah.
Dastyari.
Yeah, I wanted that was my last question.
Dastyari, sorry to jump in.
How gone is he?
Gone.
Yeah.
Hinch's Law. You know this from the old days. Any man who says 3 times, I will not resign, will. Okay?
And finally, you
know why he's gone?
Why?
He's going to be shortened to Chinese tar baby otherwise. Yeah. You've got people like Plibersek now getting away from him,
They're planting mines under him.
And also, a lot of his own you see, they're pulling away,
Yeah. Last one, you actually write in the book, and you warn people, don't write off Malcolm Turnbull at this point.
And that's a few months ago. That's
before the last week of Parliament.
Yes. And
I still think he's got a chance.
Oh, I do. I've said back then, I think I may have said in the book, that if I'm Chloe and Bill, don't measure the curtains in the lodge yet, because they're coming back, the economy's coming back, and this is no pitch for the government, because a lot of the bills they have got through, and he has got a lot through, has been with crossbench amendments. But they say, you voted with the government. They don't know the Labor amendments and the crossbench amendments. Like Gonski, all those Gonski amendments that Birmingham got through, they were given to me by the Greens. Because the Greens didn't want to have their hands on it because of the Education Union, but every amendment I gave the government that went through was given to me by Di Natale and Sarah Hanson-Young.
Interesting. What amazing year. You've got another big year ahead. Have a great break. Have a wonderful Christmas, and thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks, Graham.
Good to see you again. Hinch versus Canberra, behind the human headlines. One of those really good Christmas stocking stuffers, but make sure you read it before you stuff it, or do it afterwards. Darren Hinch has written it. It's 4 minutes away from news. Now, for my 2GB audience, Darren will be at Dymocks in the city today, 10 o'clock, and that will be for a book signing, Hinch versus Canberra.
On the Alan Jones Breakfast Show, The Business Report with Ross Greenwood.
With a minute on the clock, Ross Greenwood, welcome.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris Smith.
Bitcoin futures started overnight.
Okay, so I want to take you back before the global financial crisis, when all of those, sort of funds managers started to short the US housing market. It was shown in that film, The Big Short, if you ever saw that.
Yeah.
And it was about the fact that they suddenly got things called credit default swaps and collateralized debt obligations. It meant that they could short the securities that were issued to provide the mortgages. Well, overnight, for the very first time, Bitcoin futures have been created on the Chicago Board of Exchange. Now, to be fair, Bitcoin went up, and so did those futures, up above $17,000 US. For the very first time, anybody who is anti-Bitcoin has got the ability to short them, to bring down the price. So watch this space, because for the very first time, the bears have got claws. The Dow Jones Index overnight up by 44 points, $75.3 US cents.
Thank you, Ross. Ross Greenwood with the Business Report. 10.5 minutes after 8 o'clock. Don't forget, we'll open the lines in about 30 minutes' time. Love to hear from you. And I've also got one of those VQ Retro mini digital radios to give away. We'll do that and select one of the callers in that open line segment. Well, terrorism reared its ugly head again overnight. One person has been taken into custody in New York City after an explosion on the city's subway system. The blast rocked an area near Times Square in an attempted terrorist attack at the city's Port Authority building. Now, 3 other people were injured in the attack, but none of the injuries are reported to be life-threatening, which is such a relief. It's believed the suspect, who was arrested at the scene, had a pipe bomb strapped to his body, which exploded in a passageway underground. Now, the New York Police Commissioner described the suspect as 27-year-old Arkayed Ullah. It comes as counter-terrorism experts meet in Melbourne this week. Yesterday, they said the global fight against terror has entered a dangerous and unpredictable phase, almost prophetic. Experts say Islamic State fighters will mount a guerrilla resurgence in Syria and escalate their virtual war against the West by calling for attacks in Australia and allied countries. Now, the counter-terrorism expert said, although Islamic State has ceded its caliphate, it presents a serious and ongoing threat. And there are two critical issues here. The first is Islamic leadership. Although information shared by the Five Eyes, the global terrorism watchdog network, has resulted in plots being disrupted and suspects prosecuted here and overseas, experts say data encryption is one of the biggest problems facing global counter-terrorism agencies. Islamic State is using the internet to radicalise would-be followers in their home countries. Islamic leaders need to be active and alert in identifying potential terrorists. And it's happening on their watch. They are the eyes on the ground. And they need to take responsibility for identifying young people being radicalised. Now, the second critical issue is stopping jihadis from returning from war zones. Immigration Minister Peter Dutton said that since the start of the Syrian conflict, there had been 220 passport cancellations. So we're getting somewhere. But each and every one of those identified as associating with Islamic State should be stopped from entering Australia. It's time to face facts. We are at war, and we're in it to win it. 13 minutes after 8 o'clock, 13 after 7 in Queensland. Now, where is this industry heading? There's a new ride-sharing service to be launched in Australia today that's promising to take Uber head-on. A competitor to Uber, not just the taxi industry. It's called Taxify. Taxify. It launches in Sydney at 10 o'clock today. It's offering users a 50% discount for the first month. It'll roll out in Melbourne before Christmas as well. Now, Taxify is operated through an app. It's massive in Europe, this, Central America too, and Africa to a lesser degree, with 4 million users across 20 countries and $1 billion in revenue. So it works for those operating the system. Unlike Uber, which takes between 22 and 30% commission from drivers, Taxify takes just 15%. There are 4,000 drivers registered for Taxify already. But they're offering half-price fares for the next month. Keep your eye on that one, to be launched today. It's called Taxify. Oh, the search for the body of an 11-year-old boy swept into the ocean on the New South Wales mid-north coast last week has been scaled back. Now, police yesterday continued patrolling the foreshore of Port Macquarie's Lighthouse Beach for the Canberra boy who was caught in a rip last Wednesday afternoon, but there's been a massive sea and air search effort for 3 days and nothing. They say it's now a body recovery operation. A police spokesman said rescue aircraft will make a sweep of the coast when passing, but no body and no boy for that family to head into Christmas with. He is gone, just like that. Now, in sport, there are reports today that Michael Maguire has been appointed the NRL's referees coach. As you know, Madge coached South Sydney to the premiership in 2014, but was removed at the end of this season after a series of poor performances. Current referees boss Tony Archer, he's set to be moved to a national development role and will have no input on the appointment of referees each weekend. Maguire will be on a panel of 3 to appoint match officials to remove any perception of bias or favouritism. Now, you often hear fans say, our club gets the same referee every week. More details will be announced this week, but it's understood Maguire has taken the job. He missed out on the Origin job given to Brad Fittler and the Titans job. That was to Garth Brennan, but he's got a fairly high job in the NRL now, referees coach. And this may be one of the biggest deals in the history of world sport. The New York Yankees baseball team have signed Giancarlo Stanton from the Miami Marlins in a deal worth, wait for this, $430 million over the next 13 years. Has to be the biggest in world sport. He's the reigning most valuable player. He hit 59 home runs last season. It's on the third time in the history of American baseball that the reigning MVP has been traded. It works out, $33 million a season for the next 13 years. $33 million a season and guaranteed for 13 years. Stanton is just 28 years of age. So he's now contracted until the age of 41. Incredible story in world sport today. It is the season to be winning. It is the 12 days of Christmas, and we are giving you the chance to share in over $20,000 worth of prizes. Today's prize, 4 $250 vouchers from justwines.com.au. And congratulations to today's winners. Jacqueline Fisher from Neutral Bay, Ruth Clark from Wollongong, Yulia Prokhorova from Allawah, and Amanda Fulton from North Lakes. Well done. You've each won a $250 Just Wines voucher. And if you'd like to share in over $20,000 worth of prizes, of course you would, get to the win page, 2gb.com or 4bc.com.au, and tell us why you love Christmas. Today's the 9th day of Christmas, thanks to justwines.com.au, proudly supporting Aussie wineries. Check them out online at justwines.com.au. 17 after 8, 17 after 7 in Queensland. Chris Smith for Alan Jones. 10 minutes away from news time.
From Mandurah to Mareeba, Kingaroy to Katanning. If there's a tale worth telling, you'll hear about it on the Bush Telegraph.
Yeah, you thought it was the last, right? Well, Dan Mullins is here with the Bush Telegraph. He said last week with Alan it'd be his last, but by popular demand, in other words, I asked him, he's come in for one last time in 2017. Can't get enough, mate.
G'day, Smithy.
This week the stories are from Granny's Guts to Boggy Holes. Which one's made up?
Neither. Granny's Guts is in Tasmania, Boggy Holes is in rural New South Wales.
Granny's Guts. What is it, Granny's Guts? Is it a place?
Yes, a place. In Tasmania.
A farm?
A little place.
Granny's
Not
Guts.
much there, but Granny's Guts nonetheless. Okay. Keep an eye out for it.
Jeez.
Look, I know this is radio. We shouldn't be talking about photographs, but Ian from Charters Towers has been writing to us here about flying foxes. Have a look at that picture there, Smithy. He's got it in his hand now.
Unbelievable.
200,000 bats. Ian calls them flying rats. They're up there terrorising the locals. They've tripled in numbers over the last 3 months. The locals say they can't go out of their homes. They can't hang the washing on the line. The children don't want to play in the yard. Oh. And flying foxes are hosts of Hendra virus and Lyssa virus. And the Department of Environment and Heritage Protection in Queensland warns you to stay away from them. As Ian says, how on earth do we stay away from them when there are 200,000 of them in the backyard? And untreated bites or scratches can be fatal. You can't touch them. They're apparently mainly based in what's called Lister Park. And Ian says locals have had a gutful. No one in government gives a tinker's toss. And he says residents have planned a protest rally this weekend. So keep your eye on local media up there in Charters Towers. Get out and have your say.
And the feces and wee rains down on everyone. It takes Duco off your cars. It's disgusting. If you leave your washing out for a few days after it cops this stuff,
you can't.
You can't get the smear out of the clothes.
And the photographs that Ian sent me are of park benches, of children's swings in the park and all that. But you just don't go there. 200,000 of them.
Yeah.
Now, I know we're mid-December and Movember is ancient history, but I received an email from Michael in the tiny West Australian town of Mingenew a few weeks ago. I didn't get a chance to run it. Smithy, I remember you growing a mow a couple of years ago.
3 years ago. Yeah,
3 years ago.
Yeah. And then before that, we were able to colour our hair, so I did a red colour.
Right.
Which wasn't very red.
So anyway. No moustache or coloured hair this year?
No, I can't stand the beard. It itches me too much after 3 or 4 weeks. I'm itching all the time.
It was dashing, though. It was dashing. The men of the local cricket club, the Mingenew Gringos, all grew moustaches last month. They raised $80,000, 40 blokes all up, 300 k's north of Perth. Great. They had a big gig a couple of weeks ago. More than 300 people turned up to the cricket, listened to guest speakers, take part in an auction, all for a good cause. 468 Australian men died last month alone due to prostate cancer.
Wonderful.
Do you know that Movember since 2003 has raised $685 million?
Incredible.
Australian idea, 3 blokes in a pub one afternoon. What can we do for charity?
Great stuff.
Yeah.
The long, long drive.
Yeah, look, a mate of mine's just returned from travelling from Adelaide to Darwin on the Garn. It was a rort, by the way. And he was having a beer. He was having a beer in Coober Pete. He got talking to the locals. They were telling him about what's called the Chasing the Sun golf tournament. You've heard of the Nullarbor Links, right? The world's longest golf course. 18-hole, par 72 golf course. Over 1,365 kilometres. Basically, there's a hole each town as you sort of drive from Kalgoorlie in West Australia to Ceduna in South Australia.
What's the longest par on that golf course?
They're all par 4, par 5, but you just drive for 250 k's between each hole.
Right, okay.
And each hole includes a green and a tee, but nothing but dirt in between. But you can play this Chasing the Sun tournament next April. Goes for about 2 weeks. You play a hole a day. Then you gather under the stars that night to soak up the landscape.
Beautiful.
You chase the sunset, right? Out in the bush in the middle of nowhere. If you and I play our cards right, I reckon I can get us a Guernsey.
Yes.
What do you reckon?
Another junket. Let's go. You got a tip for it?
April next year. Yeah, carols everywhere in the lead up to Christmas. Support your locals and do the right thing. But I'm heading to Wagga Wagga for what's called the Cork and Fork Fest. Friday week at the Wagga Wagga Civic Precinct. Everyone welcome, locals and visitors.
Nice.
Local food, musos, beer and wine. Fantastic. December the 22nd in the centre of Wagga Wagga, Burns Way, off Tarcutta Street, Friday week, the 22nd of December.
And you are recording some music today. Tell people the story. This is incredible. And someone has told you to go to a particular studio and see Garth.
Yeah, Garth will let you in.
Who's Garth?
Garth Porter from Sherbet.
From Sherbet.
Can you believe it?
Oh, bring your Sherbet records. Get them all signed.
I'm going to meet him today.
I'm excited. Thank you,
so
mate.
Am I.
Good on you. Thank you for a great year too, by the way, with Bush Telegraph.
Always a pleasure.
Love it. Boggy Holes. Where is Boggy Holes?
Out in behind the mid-north coast. Okay. About an hour in from the mid-north coast.
I think he makes these things up. 25 minutes after 8, 25 after 7 in Queensland.
The US Report, thanks to Peters of Kensington. Open 7 days at Barangaroo, Birkenhead Point and Kensington. Or shop online at petersofkensington.com.au.
Welcome, Harley Carnes.
Thank you, Chris.
Now, the New York attack, we've been telling our listeners about it throughout the program. Thankfully, almost a fizz of this.
Yeah, we got lucky in this regard because this wasn't a very well-made bomb or bomb vest, if you will. The man evidently has been a chatterbox after they picked him up, after they arrested him. He was on the ground. Commuters were getting away from him right after the blast, and police, of course, picked him up pretty quickly. Evidently, they were able to declare rapidly that it was inspired by ISIS. He said so. Evidently, his name was Ullah Aqayed Ullah. He's from Bangladesh, I think, or someplace like that. This is one of those situations where we don't know who's here. This is a guy who came here on an F4 visa, one of those preferential visas available to people who have family here already.
Uh-huh.
So it's called chain visas, one to the next to the next to the next. Very controversial, and that it's a kind of visa that's under attack at the moment politically in this country. But this is not the sort of thing we want to see happen. You'd think after living here for several years, you might actually have come to like America.
Yes.
Not.
Yeah, that's what I think about every time this happens. Now, the Pentagon to allow transgender recruits, Harley.
Yeah, the Pentagon is deciding that they will allow and are already allowing transgender people to enlist in the military. There are new guidelines that the Pentagon's putting together. They can disqualify a potential recruit if they have what's called gender dysphoria, which is a history of medical treatments associated with the transition, or who underwent reconstruction. But those, if they get a medical provider that swears that they're in good shape mentally, physically, and so forth, and stable, then they can stay. So while the Pentagon's going to let them in, they could be tossed out again if things don't look right.
All right.
It's a situation where these days the Pentagon says, hey, if you want to serve, come on in, put your right hand up, and we'll hand you a rifle.
Yeah, but you've got to be able to do the job, and that's the testing time. All right, SpaceX working on a new chapter.
Well, they are. I mean, they for the first time, they have used a recycled rocket for NASA. NASA in the business of space would use a rocket. That was it. They weren't going to ever use it again.
Yeah.
But SpaceX is private. They can take a little bit bigger chances, perhaps. So they've used an unmanned Falcon 9. It was last used in June, carrying up a Dragon capsule. It'll be flown it was up on a previous mission as well. So they can, recycle these things.
Wow.
And, while it's a dangerous business, they have worked it out. They're doing a pretty doggone good job when you think about it. So this latest Dragon to fly, last flew back in 2015.
Wow.
They've got it all refurbished and ready to go.
Space exploration on the cheap by the sound of it, but let's hope it's safe. Thank you, Harley. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Harley Carnes.
Chris Smith filling in for Alan Jones. Thanks to Vodafone. Want a no locking contract? See vodafone.com.au/plans. T's and C's apply.
If you've got to be somewhere at 9 o'clock, daylight saving time, you've got 20 minutes to get there. So get a wriggle on. It is 20 to 8 in Queensland. Good to have your company. 131873 is the telephone number. Someone between now and the top of the hour will get for themselves a VQ Retro Mini digital radio. I gave one away yesterday at the same time. We'll give one away to one of our callers on the open line between now and 9. It's fantastic, this little digital radio. It's got a handle. It's only a small box. It's not like a big one, so you can put it on the side table in your bedroom or maybe on the kitchen table. It is a beauty. VQ Retro Mini digital radio, which you should get anyway. Get it for Christmas from someone. And you can get it from any of the big stores that sell electrical equipment, and it's worth about $129. 131873. Voters go to the polls in Bennelong. We discussed with Shari Markson today what the polls are telling us, what the internal polling is saying about Bill Shorten, the fact that he's turning people away from the Labor Party. Is that right? The two-party preferred vote, according to Newspoll, is 50-50 in Bennelong. Christina Keneally could pull this off. And all this business about, it's Eddie Obeid and it's Joe Tripodi on a shoulder, etc. People have long forgotten about that. 19% of a poll said she was one of the worst premiers. 15% said she was below average, and the rest were fairly positive. But is Bill Shorten a turn-off every time he turns up to Bennelong? I'd love to know from those in the seat what they think about this fairly high-profile election campaign. 131873. Malcolm Turnbull, Mr. Everywhere Man, he wants a federal ICAC. Do you agree with that? Is it time we put federal bureaucrats, agencies and politicians under the microscope like ICAC in New South Wales and the Corruption Commission in Queensland? 131873. And is it time that Tony Abbott was brought in as a minister in 2018 to keep the momentum in favour of the coalition leading up to the next federal election? We've had that suggestion when we last opened the lines this morning. I don't think it's a bad idea. And has Malcolm Turnbull done enough to reduce your power bills? Not if you were listening yesterday and you heard about the lady who couldn't afford a power bill, and when it became dark, she used a torch to get around at night. Didn't turn the lights on. 131873. Hi, Judy. You are a Bennelong resident, I've just been told. Oh, Judy's dropped out. She was on a mobile phone. See if we can get Judy back. I'll be very interested to hear what she thinks about this high-profile election campaign. Steph, g'day.
G'day, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I'm a school cleaner. I've been cleaning schools for the past 16 years.
Mm-hmm. In New South Wales?
In Sydney.
Yep.
One close to home. I was there for 8 years. I was the leading hand. Then I got transferred to the Hawkesbury at a very small school, so I'm the sole cleaner there.
Yep.
Now, I went to a union meeting a couple of weeks ago because I'm off work without pay at the moment because I have a hernia problem.
Yep.
Anyway, I was quite shocked at what they said. They said there was a fellow who...
So this is the Health Services Union?
No. This is...
What union is
this?
this?
United. It's called...
Okay.
United.
And you were shocked?
Pardon?
You were shocked? Why?
Well, they said that they're going to cut out the holiday pay and sick leave and all the rest, and that we'd have to reapply for our jobs after July. This is because the contract has been extended, and the government wants to cut costs, I guess. Anyway, but what really got...
But are you suggesting that the entire award is going to change?
Well, I
haven't heard anything about this.
Yeah, well, that's what the union led us to believe.
Have you done any research into this?
No, I haven't. And my employer's representative, I told her about going to union meeting and what have you, and she said, I'm not sure that it's true.
No, I'm not sure
that it is.
Leave it, Steph. Stay right where you are. I'll put you back through to James, and we'll get your details, and we'll make an inquiry and see if we can come up with an answer for you tomorrow. How's that?
Thank you very much.
Good on you. And you have every reason to be concerned, especially if that's what you're hearing from your union. 131873. Hi, Judy. Got your back.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. You're in Bennelong?
Yes, I'm a Bennelong resident, and I've never had so many phone calls in my life about an election.
Oh, you're bombarded.
Yeah, they're getting our mobiles, they ring it, volunteers from each of them, surveys, you name it. If the effort both parties are going to is unbelievable.
Yeah, this is a major by-election. If it depends on, not only the local candidates, but this is a reflection of what's going on at a federal level, and so therefore, whoever wins takes enormous momentum into the Christmas summer break, you see?
That's right, and I think a lot of us are telling them just to make them realise we're fed up with both parties to a large degree.
Yeah.
So there's quite a protest attitude going on against John Alexander, because he's never really done anything except quote the party line. If you write to him about anything, you don't get any genuine response from him. I've written to him myself.
But do you get any response at all?
I did, but it was just a ream of garbage of the party line. There was not one personal comment from him in the whole thing.
Can I temper that with this, Judy? I've heard from so many people who've written to their federal members and they don't even get a standard template reply. Nothing. So, yes, I'm hearing what you're saying, but at least you got something. You got an email back, did you?
Yes, that was it.
Yeah, but unsatisfactory.
Yes, and we know Christine Keneally's past and all the rest of it, and I think it shows how determined the Labor Party is that they've parachuted her into the election.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I also think I don't like the pork barrelling that the Liberals are doing with some silly announcement about a Macquarie interchange.
It seems like
they're treating us like idiots.
Well, it seems like as if it was made up on the back of a postage, or back of a drink coaster.
That's right, exactly. They're all just desperate. So it'll be, and most of us just don't really care because we know whoever gets in won't do anything for the electorate anyway.
All right, Judy, thank you very much. That's an interesting reflection, and similar to what we discussed with Shari Markson earlier today, with the major parties, both of them are on the nose. So how many of those votes that would normally go to the major parties are going to be dispersed to the likes of the Australian Conservatives, etc.? I think a lot more than what they think. The other subject I wanted to raise a little further, we discussed it earlier, but the train chaos yesterday. How much did it impact you? And I spoke with Andrew Constance before, but to consider the fact that you were unimpeded by any emergency or any police cordoned off area on our rail system by about 10 o'clock in the morning, and you're still having problems at 6 o'clock at night, is not good enough. It's not good enough in a first world country and in a city like Sydney. It's not good enough. And I didn't think his response to it all was the kind of scrutiny we should have heard from the Transport Minister, and he should be putting a lot of pressure on those down the chain who could have turned this around. Like, they've got new timetables, they're telling us that it's more efficient than ever before, and yet they can't get things right in about 7 hours. They get 7 hours to get it right, and they've still got problems. Not good enough. If you want to comment, give us a call on 131873. 12 minutes away from news. 8 minutes away from news. Now, it seems to be an epidemic of politicians having their social media accounts infiltrated. We had Christopher Pyne, and then Health Minister Greg Hunt, and now Ambassador to the US Joe Hockey claims his Twitter has also been infiltrated. The former Liberal Treasurer appeared to like a tweet made during last night's episode of Q&A, or should I say Monday's episode of Q&A, which made a disparaging remark about the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. And the Federal Police have their hands full investigating 3 hacking separate complaints. None of these platforms are safe, especially if you're high profile, you're a target, and people want to get you. 131873. Lynn, go right ahead.
Oh, good morning.
Morning.
I wanted to say that I agree with the other lady who said there are a lot of callers on home phones and mobiles. It's pretty much driven me nuts, but I haven't even, in the end, I just hang up because I don't know who they're from, and I figure I haven't got time for that. But I did want to make a positive comment about John Alexander.
Yep.
We have, my husband and I, we have a son with disabilities, and we were having a lot of problems getting our funding organised, and John and his team stepped in and helped us immensely.
Oh, that's good.
We were absolutely overwhelmed with how much that he did for us and how he actually totally understood the situation we were in.
Yeah.
I also...
He's a genuinely nice bloke. I've been to functions with John, and in a previous life I used to ball boy for him when he was a young tennis player for Australia.
He loves his tennis.
He loves his tennis, and a great tennis player, and I remembered he doing lots of lovely things for people who were his fans at White City, even when he was a young tennis player, and I've seen him do a lot for others who've written to him and asked for help. I don't know what he's done in Bennelong because it's not my electorate, but it's interesting to hear what you have experienced.
Yeah, the other thing is I know a lot of other families with, family members, children, whatever, with disability, and they say exactly the same thing, that he is a good man, that he has done everything that he can, and Even though a lot of people may say that he hasn't done a lot to help people, I think he's done it in an unassuming way.
Yeah.
He's done a lot of things in the background to help a lot of people.
Yeah, you don't have to be a big noter or a big mouth to be effective.
Yep.
Lynn, can I get you that fabulous VQ Retro Mini digital radio from Commercial Radio Australia?
Oh, my goodness.
Yours.
Wow.
Yours, Lynn.
Very generous of you. Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Stay online. We'll get your details and we'll get that out to you. The VQ Retro Mini Digital Radio. You've got to get into digital radio. It's fantastic. 131-873. Hi, Bill.
Oh, hi. Yeah, look, I'm getting sick and tired of it all. The antics that are going on. But particularly Labor, they seem to be just bullying the other parties. I noticed that they won't allow any space for their picket boards for the other parties. They try to take over the polling areas.
Well, the latest is their signage has been staked into the ground and affixed to telegraph poles, which is entirely against the local bylaws.
Yeah, well, I'd heard that on a spruik somewhere. But you walk down the pavements and you're accosted by these people who throw the leaflets right in front of you. They block the pavement. They sit on chairs.
Oh, leave us alone.
Chairs coming up and the other people that are really aggressive is I noticed the Greens. I saw them picking on Australian Conservatives. This old man, and he was about half the size of these guys. And I think that was just shortly before an incident where the Greens made this pretend dive on the ground as though they'd fallen over.
You know, Australians don't go for this stuff, this solicitation, and you can turn off voters onto another party by doing it. Don't you agree, Bill?
Well, look, that's happened to me. I'm sick of the two major parties. I certainly wouldn't want Greens, and I'm looking very carefully at the Australian Conservatives because I like their policies, and they seem to thread with what the old, Conservative Liberal Party represented.
Okay, you're not alone. Thank you, Bill. Michael, very quickly, go right ahead.
Yes, hi, good morning.
Morning.
I'm certainly not voting for Christina Keneally. When she was New South Wales Premier, she was just a puppet on a string, as far as I'm concerned, for a bunch of criminals. Why should I vote for her?
Yeah, well, she was also the one that gave evidence against them in ICAC, though, Michael.
Well, yeah, as she should have, shouldn't he? Secondly, John Alexander has done a lot of good. He highlighted the housing problem for young people very usefully, and although I don't agree with a lot of the policies of the Prime Minister, I shall support John Alexander next Saturday.
Good to get your call, thank you. These are all Bennelong electorate voters, and they've got a choice to make. And it's a difficult choice, which is why it's 50-50 according to Newspoll at the moment. They're two good candidates. Surprisingly enough, they both live outside the electorate. So they won't be actually voting on Saturday. You won't be seeing those pictures on Saturday night. How bizarre. Gee, it's been a busy week already, hasn't it? Back early tomorrow. Hopefully you'll join me then. Ray Hadley is in next. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. This is Chris Smith for Alan Jones.